So our webinar today, we are going to focus on dairy issues that have arisen in regard to the COVID-19 outbreak. We're also just going to focus on some basic dairy issues as well. Next slide. Our rough schedule, we're going to start with Doug Eberly from the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board, and he will talk about recent developments with that organization. Then around 11:20 or so, then Marvin Beshore is going to talk about federal milk marketing orders. Then around 11:40 or so, Brook Duer, the staff attorney for the Ag Law Center, is going to talk about a number of other developments related to the dairy industry. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Doug Eberly. So Doug, take it away.
Hey, good morning. I hope everyone can hear me. I've got a mic plugged into my laptop today.
Sounds good, Doug.
Okay, good. Just briefly, the Milk Marketing Board is an independent state agency. So we regulate the economics of milk transactions in Pennsylvania. And early on in this, in the pandemic and the governor's emergency declaration, we had a flurry of activity, and that has kind of dropped off now. And from a state standpoint, we're more back to normal at this point. What I'll do is try to go through a little bit of what the board does and is supposed to do to give you some background of what we did in response to some of the market disruptions that were caused in the early stages of the pandemic, with restaurants closing and schools closing and people trying to get in and buy as much milk as they could at stores, that kind of thing. So if we can go, I guess, Brooke, to the next slide.
Yep. Do you want me to advance past this one to the?
After that one.
Okay.
And the board, let me tell you one more thing about the board. It's 3 members, and they're all appointed by the governor with the approval of the Senate. So like I said, we are an independent state agency. And what the board does is what the milk marketing law requires the board to do. We don't, the board doesn't do anything outside the law. The board does everything the law requires it to do. And what the milk marketing law requires the board to do is establish cost-based minimum producer wholesale and retail prices. The Milk Producer Security Act is there, and that requires people that purchase Pennsylvania producer milk to post some kind of security to make sure the farmers are paid. Now, something that we do that isn't quite totally, required by the law, but which is implied, is we operate a milk tank calibration truck, and I think we calibrate about 200 to 250 bulk farm tanks every year to make sure they're weighing correctly. And in conjunction with that, and is required by the law, we certify weighers and samplers, and we also help the Department of Agriculture with the PMO weigher sampler certification that's required. That's the in-person inspections. And if we move to the next slide, it would tell us that the minimum producer price that the board sets is basically the federal order price plus the over-order premium that the board establishes. And then the minimum wholesale price is just the minimum producer price plus dealer costs. And that's an average dealer cost based on a cross-section of dealers that are doing business in different areas of the state. And then the minimum retail price is basically the minimum wholesale price plus the cost to retailers to handle and sell milk in the store. And those costs are determined at public hearings, which anyone is welcome to attend, and the board gets evidence of what those costs are and issues an order. And this kind of harks back to something that Brook said in the first webinar. You know, what's a legal development? You know, everything the government does is something legal, and you see it right here. You know, we have a law that we enforce and administer, and that law requires us to issue orders establishing these prices, and we've got some court orders that interpret our law that we follow, and we issue regulations that implement not these things, but some, well, actually they do implement these things. Those regulations control how these dealer costs are recorded and reported and things like that. And if you would go to the next slide, Brook, just this is something that I'm not sure is always totally understood, but the overorder premium is just part of the minimum producer price. And since the minimum producer price is part of the minimum wholesale price, and the minimum wholesale price is part of the minimum retail price, the overorder premium, therefore, is part of the minimum retail price. And that's how it gets paid back to farmers. The store gets that when you buy a gallon of milk, and the store pays that to the dealer when the dealer sells that store a gallon of milk, and then the dealer pays that back to the producer. So the board doesn't handle any of that money. The board just audits to make sure that money is going where it's supposed to be going, and I think that might just be the next slide if Brook advances. Yeah, it is. We audit dealers every month to make sure that dealers that purchase Pennsylvania produced milk are paying farmers correctly. And that will segue into the next slide, the Milk Producer Security Act. That requires that dealers provide security to ensure producers are paid. And most dealers do that by posting a bond. And that bond will cover about 1 month's worth of producer milk purchases. The Security Act was amended in 2004. Before that, the Milk Producer Security Fund was used and maybe abused because dealers could move in and out of it at will. And you can see there from the slide, it tells you that the security fund dealers, they can post a smaller bond. It only covers about 10 days worth of purchases, and then they pay 2 cents per hundredweight into the security fund. And doing that, it takes a while for the bond plus the security fund to actually equal about 1 month's worth of producer purchases. So the legislature grandfathered in the participants in the security fund that were in there in 2004. And now if you want to get in the security fund, you have to petition the board and you have to do more. Your bond has to be more. You have to contribute more to the security fund. And this will be important later when we talk about Dean Foods declaring bankruptcy. And then quickly, the bulk tank calibration truck, you know, it's important to make sure that the weights are correct because it's important that producers are paid what they're owed, and it's also important or are paid based on an accurate weight. And it's also important that dealers are paying based on an accurate weight. And we'll maybe touch on this a little bit when we talk about some of the on-farm milk dumping. And then the board also with the weigher sampler, yeah, go ahead, Brook. The weigher sampler certifications, that's just to make sure that the weigher samplers are using proper procedures. Once again, to make sure that producers are paid correctly and dealers are paying correctly. So that's the background, and that's what the board's doing just in the normal course of business. And then if you kind of fast forward to March, and I think it was, I think the last day schools were in session was March like 13th maybe. And as of March 16th, I think all the schools were closed. And what happened there was milk dealers have developed certain specialties over the years. And there are some that do a lot of school milk business. Half pints are kind of a specialty container. They're, very inefficient to handle and fill. So these dealers, some dealers don't want to do it, frankly, I think. And those orders for school milk come in and then are filled. These dealers don't have a stockpile and they can't store it. So what happened was when the schools were closed, several dealers had milk already in containers that was going to be distributed, March, at the end of March to schools. So rather than have that milk just dumped or go to waste, the board talked to the Department of Agriculture, governor's office. The board talked to the legislative ag committees and got, agreement that if the board didn't enforce the minimum price on these half pints for the end of March, that would give dealers time to clear their inventory and get the milk to people that could use it and not have to end up just throwing it away. So the board didn't enforce minimum prices for that time period on half pints. And, the school feeding programs started up. I know our school district was doing that, 2 meals a day. You had to, go to one of the local schools to pick it up. And they're still doing that during the summer. So, these quantities of milk eventually found a home, and that kind of cleared out. And I guess we'll see what happens when schools start up again in the fall or in August. Now, the other problem that came, the other market disruption that was, kind of not anticipated was restaurants and institutions use a lot of cream and things. And those products didn't have a home, and they were packaged and waiting to be delivered, and people didn't want them. So once again, the board talked to the governor's office, the Department of Agriculture, the legislative committees, and said, hey, we've got this problem with this market disruption, and we'd like to just say we're not going to enforce minimum prices so that people that need these products maybe can get them, and we're not going to be wasting them. So that also was done, and that was a little bit different. It wasn't just a set time frame. It was, try to sell them, but once you get within 5 days of your sell-by date, we're not going to enforce the minimum prices. And what you may have seen in your grocery stores was some of these institutional products being sold. I know that I saw them in some of my local grocery stores. So they made their way into the regular retail chain. Some of them did. The board, as we mentioned, establishes minimum prices and every month issues those prices. And the board staff, we're set up to be able to work from home. We were set up to be able to do that before this all happened. So the board staff, even though we were not allowed in the office, issued the April 2020 minimum resale prices on March 19th. And we found out that that might cause disruptions, and that there was, you know, the stores were struggling to keep product in stock, and everybody was trying to react to, you know, this completely novel situation. So the board held a hearing and received evidence, and the evidence, you know, led the board to conclude that rather than use the April 2020 prices, and everybody has to go through and change their prices, and, you know, stores are busy worrying about other stuff right now, we'll just leave the March 2020 prices in place. And we did that, and, you know, ever since then, everything's changed monthly as it's supposed to. The next thing that the board did was try to increase producer prices. And I got to thank Brook for remembering the right term for that. That was market relief surcharge. And that came to us, you know, through Marvin Beshore. As Ross said, Marvin's does national dairy work. And that came from, I guess, the Southeast Cooperative Marketing Agency, that idea. And the board held an expedited hearing to allow it to increase, in effect, the overorder premium. It was called a market relief surcharge. And that was effective for May and June. And, you know, you can read the order on the website, but basically it set a Class 1 mover floor at $15. And I'm sorry I didn't look up the May and June Class 1 movers before I came on today. But pretty simple. The federal order does its mumbo jumbo and comes up with a Class 1 order or a Class 1 mover. And the difference between that Class 1 mover and $15, because that Class 1 mover is less than $15, was added to the overorder premium. And so it was $1 plus whatever it was. I think it was like maybe $2.93 in May. Marvin would know better than that, better than me on that problem. And then with on-farm dumping, we worked with the processors. We worked with farmers. They called us about this. Some of the processors simply just didn't have anything to do with all the milk they were getting, so they had to ask farmers to dump some of their milk on the farm, or, you know, otherwise dispose of it. I mean, it could have been sold to other processors, and I know some was. And this is where the importance of, you know, some farmers are certified as weigher samplers, and, you know, they all have the stick, and they can all measure their milk. And we advise them to keep track of how much milk they dumped, because now there's legislation in place to allow them to start getting some compensation for milk that was dumped. And then if we go to the next slide, I'll just real quick mention that we are in the process right now of getting ready to hold a hearing, actually 4 hearings, to make claims against Dean Bonds. When Dean declared bankruptcy, you know, it did keep paying producers, but then all the assets were sold at the end of April, and Dean didn't make that April final payment that was due May 18th, May 19th, depending on which federal order you were in. And independent farmers did eventually get paid, but cooperatives have not been paid yet. And this is why we have these bonds, because now we can go get some money, and actually we'll be able to get all the money that's owed to the cooperatives from the Dean plants that we license and that have bonds. And those hearings will be held on June 30th, with the idea being that at the board's July 8th sunshine meeting, it will issue the orders making the claims on the bonds. And we've already talked to the insurance companies, so we don't expect any problem with getting that payment. And that's it. And boy, I apologize if I went past my time.
I think you're pretty good, Doug. We had a little, okay. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it. This is Brook Duer. I'm just going to handle the transition. We next have Marvin Beshore to talk to us about federal milk marketing order pricing and some recent developments, which hopefully is good news. Marvin is a nationally known practitioner in the area of dairy pricing, represents most of the largest national dairy cooperatives in various forums across the country. And so, Marvin, I will turn it over to you, and just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Good. Thank you, Brooke, and good morning, everyone. Go ahead to the next slide. The next slide, please. I want to.
You want that one?
Keep going.
Okay.
Next. Yep. I want to just talk about how the events of COVID-19 and their impacts in dairy markets, how they're affecting and will affect the price that Pennsylvania dairy farmers will be receiving, or have received, and will be receiving for their milk in the coming months. There've been, the market events have been, unprecedented in many ways, and the things that it's going to do, has done, or is going to do to milk checks, producer milk checks is unprecedented in many respects. So the slides I've got, some of them are very data intense. I'm going to try to just go through them quickly, keep to my time, and maybe leave time for questions that might be more important than me talking for the participants. So first of all, an overview of Pennsylvania's production, the USDA NAS and how it's regulated. The USDA NAS for May 2020 reported 865 million pounds of milk marketed from Pennsylvania farms. They don't give the number of farms, but they report the number of cows, 485,000 cows in milk in Pennsylvania. Is an average of 85 herd size in Pennsylvania. That's 5,705 dairy farms. I think the real indications are the average farm size in Pennsylvania is larger than that now, probably something like 95, which means we've got probably a little over 5,000 dairy farms currently marketing milk in Pennsylvania. Of that 865 million pounds of production in May 2020, Federal Market Order 1, the Northeast Marketing Order, was the home for 711 million of those pounds, or 82+% produced in Pennsylvania. Order 1's the Northeast Marketing Order. Order 33, which is the Mideast Marketing Order that impacts Western Pennsylvania. Regulated 80 is the home pooling home for 80 million pounds roughly of Pennsylvania production, or just a little 9%, a little less than 10% of milk. The other 8% of Pennsylvania milk is either regulated in other federal orders, or there's a portion that is regulated solely by the Pennsylvania Milk Marketing Board, as Eberly just described, and there's a little bit of grade B milk in Pennsylvania. Roughly, that's 74 million, about 26 million or so is marketed down into the Carolinas Marketing Order number 5. So that's an overview. I want to focus on Order 1 and how the marketing developments impact Order 1, the pricing in Order 1, which covers most of the milk. The impacts on the other federal orders are roughly the same. Federal Order 1, this is the marketing area. The marketing area doesn't cover a lot of the geographic area of Pennsylvania, but it represents the area in which, as we see, 80+% of Pennsylvania's milk production is marketed, and through the marketing there is pooled and regulated. The The order is 54 pages of technical regulatory language. The index to it is there. We're not going to talk about it, but that's talk about detail. But that's just I think everybody who's involved in dairy kind of has had their mind glaze over at these regulations at some time or another. So next slide, Brook, please. So basics of pricing and federal orders. Federal orders price milk, set minimum prices that handlers must pay for milk based on how it's used. 4 classes of minimum prices are set, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this slide I just touches on and indicates what those classes are and how the price is set. And, first of all, class 1, of course, is fluid milk, drinking milk. It's the most, it's generally, we'll see the exceptions as we go on here, but it's generally the highest price class. That's why it's called class 1, I guess. And its price, minimum price, is set based on the minimum prices calculated for storable dairy products, cheese, butter, powder, plus a fluid milk differential. So the federal order system in order 1 sets a differential of $3.25 per hundredweight over and above the base price established from the dairy product prices. That price is applicable then for class 1 milk in the Boston area, and there's a geographic grid which prices, the differential is somewhat less than that as you move south and west from Boston. The differential in Pennsylvania is 305 in southeastern Pennsylvania and Philadelphia area, and 210 when you get all the way west in Pittsburgh. The middle part of the state, the differential's 280 in most areas. In central Pennsylvania, 280 and 270. Class 2, soft manufacturing products, that's yogurt, cottage cheese, ice cream, creamers, half and half, and such. That also has a differential of 70 cents set off the class 4 price. Class 4 price plus 70 cents. So class 1 and class 2 have differentials added to the values of manufacturing milk. So that's where the additional value in federal order pool is generated. Class 3 is milk into cheese. The cheese prices are calculated from a survey of the price paid for cheddar cheese, a survey done by the Agricultural Marketing Service of the USDA. Class 4 is used for butter powder, other dry milks, whole powder, skim milk powder, no fat dry milk. And those prices are calculated from again, the survey of the free market prices at which buyers, sellers of large bulk quantities of butter, powder, and cheese, which the AMS survey is based on those marketplace prices for those products. Next slide, please. So this graph was in New York Times article Monday, which talked about the price of cheddar cheese and how when the price of dairy commodities gets a New York Times article, it means it's probably something that's been going on that's unusually newsworthy. And it's a great graph because it shows in the the right-hand part of it here, we've got these incredible movements. It shows what the COVID events did to the dairy marketplace. You can see the price of cheddar block cheese as sold at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange since last July had been between $1.50 and $2, a little over $2 there in the fall last year. It had, but it was relatively within a range. In the end of March and in April, it fell off the table, dropped sharply down to $1, $1 a pound, which is the lowest price that it had been since 2003, and just an incredibly low price. That would be a price equivalent to about $8 a hundredweight for farm milk. However, that after a relatively short period of time, the price for cheese began to come back, as the graph shows, to the and continued to go up and up and up and up to the extent that as of last Friday, it was $2.65 per pound. The CME, which was a record price, that previous high close of the CME was, I think, $2.45 in sometime in 2014, probably. This week, it's gone over $2.80 a pound for block cheddar cheese. It's just, the price movements have just been amazing, as you can see from the graph, and that has ripple effects that's going to go through to the producer price. Next slide, please. So just a couple more graphs here. These came from the Program on Dairy Markets and Policy at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, that just show on a different graph some of the same. This one's the same spot cheddar cheese prices that went down to $1 in April, actually, and you can see as of June 18th, it was up over $2.50 blocks, the green ones. So next slide, please. This similar movements happened in butter and powder markets. This is the butter graph for April, May, and June of this year, and you can see that butter went down to $1.11 or so in April, and since that time advanced to $2, and now it's around $1.80, $1.85. Next slide, please, which shows non-fat dry milk. And again, in April, the price of non-fat, which had been close to 90 cents a pound, down to 80 cents a pound, and then began a rise in May, along with the same timing as butter and cheese were rising, and went up to over $1, and it's presently over $1, right around today. Next slide. So, next slide, please, Brook. Thank you. So this is graph is class 3 and 4 futures values as traded on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and starting with June prices and then going out the rest of the year, you can see that the traders in futures as of June 18th on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange were calculating the price of class 3 milk to be right at $21, based on that cheese price at $2.50. And at the same time, the green or class 4 had come up to, or was down around $13, $13.50 or so. Okay, next slide. But they project they're going to come together for the rest of the year. Now, what does this mean for how's this going to affect producer prices in here for the next couple of months? So first, I just wanted to show the historical average, 20 years. These are average prices in order one for from 2000 through 2019. Class 1, you can see class 1's higher than class 2. It's 1878. Class 2, 1534. Class 3, 1509. Class 4, 1463. Giving a statistical uniform price, more or less the average price in the market of 1684. And in Pennsylvania, with the negative location adjustment of 45 in central Pennsylvania, that's around 1630. The lower chart shows the component values. Producers are paid in pounds of butter, fat, protein, and other solids. And the producer price differential, which is the value over and above the manufactured component values, the value that the federal order distributes to all producers based on that class 1 differential value and the class 2 differential value, and basically the extent to which the average values in the market are greater than the component values, which are based off class 3. And historically, that's been $1.30 plus in Pennsylvania, $1.75 or $1.60 if you're in eastern Pennsylvania. Next slide, please. Now, just look at how this has changed. In 2019, as prices were fairly similar to the 20-year average. They were a little higher on the statistical uniform price, a little lower on the producer price differential. 2019 was, again, more or less a standard year with the class 1 price substantially higher, class 2, 3, or 4 prices, as you would expect. Let's look at what's going to happen now in May, June, and July. Next slide, please. So in May, in order 1, the class 1 price, you can see, is down to $16.20 from 2024 average in 2019. But the class 3 and class 4 prices in class 2 have fallen precipitously from $16, almost $17 in 2019 down to $12 and $10, which reflects that sharp drop in prices because of the COVID events in March and April, pushing the statistical uniform price down and the producer price differential, because class 1 was still relatively strong at close to $1. Next slide. So what's really going to happen now is what's a extremely unusual event in federal pricing. So you can see for June, the price of class 1 is down to $14.67. But as we saw before, the cheese price is strong. It's going to be less than that. The E means that's my guesstimate. Class 4 price, as we saw, is going to be around $13.40 perhaps. Class 2 a little more than class 4 because of that differential. So now the statistical uniform price is going to be around in the $15 range. The producer price differential is going to be minus as much as $5, perhaps $4.50, maybe lower than that, depending on how close my guesstimates are to what they actually are. So producers on their milk check, they're going to see their component values, which are based on the class 3 value of $21, and then their actual net check is going to be substantially lower than that because the producer price differential is going to be a big negative. Go to last slide. Last slide, please. July, just my guesstimates again, the producer price differentials could be substantially negative because the cheese price is going to be higher than the other prices, higher than class 1. And let's just have the final slide, which is what are some implications for these really unusual, extremely unusual price impacts. Negative PPDs are counterintuitive in the federal system because the prices are upside down. The class 3 price is higher than the class 1 price. Even class 4, conceivably in some cases, could get higher than class 1. Right now, the class 3 is higher than class 1, which is completely counterintuitive. Voluntary depooling of class 3 milk will occur to some extent in order 1, although the regulation is limited, which means that cheese plants, if they want to keep the $21 value of milk for themselves, will elect to take it out of the order 1 pool so that they do not have to pay into the pool on an equalization basis. You have negative PPDs. This first happened in 2003 and 2004. The USDA and the industry at that time considered it such a disruptive circumstance relating because of the way depooling was working that the orders throughout the system were amended. Voluntary depooling of the highest use values really undercuts one of the basic principles of the federal order system, which is producer price uniformity. The USDA in the recent California publication refused to require pooling of all milk, which would avoid the disorder relating to voluntary depooling. So we don't have depooling throughout the system. Order 1 is the tightest pool in the country, and it won't have as much as some other pools. How this will play out in the system, when we see these experiences, these mega negative PPDs, the story is yet to be told, and that is the conclusion of my comments.
So Marvin, this is Brook. Just one question then. So the long-term impact on the class 1 price, I guess we give us a little bit of extrapolation on that. Then you had your projections here, right?
Yeah.
And heading into the fall, then what do you think it's going to look like?
Well, so the class 1 price is based on the base price for class 1 is a price that is the average of class 3 and class 4 of a certain series of class 3 and class 4 prices plus 74 cents. So, class 1 will be high, will get higher than class 3 if class 4 moves up enough to make that equation such that the class 1 price is higher than class 3.
Right.
So it's going to come up. It's going to come up some, but it depends on how much class 4 moves and how high class 3 stays. If the futures prices on that futures graph, if they're correct, it'll equal out in a couple of months because class 3 will come down.
Yeah. So what are the forces that will bring this cheese price under control?
Supply and demand.
And do we think this is sort of irrational? I mean, that is there really the demand and for a tighter supply, or was that really, one of these irrational responses to the COVID thing that maybe isn't based in fact?
Well, buyers and sellers are charging and getting these prices. So, the people who are buying at these prices need cheese at that price, and the people that are selling are willing to sell cheese at that price. Now, the CME prices only reflect certain transactions there. The AMS prices represent a very broad, mandatorily reported to USDA by everybody selling large quantities of cheddar cheese throughout the country. From plants. So it's, ultimately these are supply and demand prices because ultimately they are based on the prices paid in the marketplace by buyers and sellers.
Are any of the government programs that are now kicking in to purchase commodities such as cheese, is that driving any of the escalating price on the CME?
The factor, certainly the government purchases, certainly, they firmed up the market. They provided a certain amount of product demand that was not there without them. It certainly had some impact. The actual aggregate amounts of those government purchases are not a huge dominant amount of the marketplace, but they're incremental. Most of the, I think who knows why prices go up so fast and down so fast in these dairy product markets, but it is notable that there were supply reductions throughout the country. In May, production in Pennsylvania was down 3%. Nationwide, it was down 1%. Mexico, which is a state produces at the level of Pennsylvania, it was down 7%. There were, buyers, cooperatives in various parts of the country and imposed base plan restrictions on their producers and said that there were going to be extreme price reductions on volumes of milk above certain levels. And the indications are that in certain areas, cows just weren't fed as much, or they weren't really, guys went from 3 times a day to 2 times a day, and there were reductions in supply as well as some tightening in demand. There was some increase in export demand for cheese that was a factor in some of this also.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about exports. Okay. And I guess the fall on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the fallback, if these cheese prices fall back in line with normal expectations, won't be any worse than what we've just been through, correct? In other words, the fall can't be harder than where everybody was before this unusual rise occurred.
I mean, that, the futures buyers and sellers are projecting, prices that were back to more or less the 2019 level. The restaurants haven't fully reopened. We don't know where the COVID demand factor, where we're going to be in the pandemic, emergency regulations throughout the country. We don't know what restaurant demand is going to be, how that's going to affect supermarket demand, which is going up when restaurants have gone down.
Okay.
All those things are unknowables. If there were a big spike in the pandemic and a big lockdown in states around the country in the fall, which is at least theoretically, possible. Some people see it as potential. Who knows what effect that would have.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Marvin. We'll go ahead just in the interest of time. Thanks. That's fascinating. Okay. I am Brook Duer, and I'm going to try to cover 4 topics here very quickly. I think I can get through it. I'm going to nix one of the topics, which is the Dairy Revenue Protection form of crop insurance program. Had a slight revision recently. I read up on it. I decided I'm not going to go over that. So 3 things I'm going to go over is the new COVID-19 Dairy Indemnity Program. I'm going to go over very quickly the DEP guidance on planned application of excess milk, and then the CFAP, or the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program for dairy, which is a big one. And then if we have time, we'll do the Dairy Margin Coverage Program and what it's sort of the COVID lesson that's being drawn from that. So first off, the Dairy Indemnity Program is a brand new thing that just occurred in the Pennsylvania budget that was recently passed, the little truncated partial 5-month budget. And it's actually in the fiscal code that accompanies the budget every year is actually where the language occurs. And essentially what it's doing is it's taking $15 million of CARES Act money, and it's federal, a federal appropriation to Pennsylvania, which is then passed through, and the governor and the Department of Agriculture got together, and actually I should say the legislature dictated this language first. So don't want to put the cart before the horse here. The legislature included this in the fiscal code, and it essentially sets up a program whereby they were going to use $15 million of federal monies received by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for a program to try to help compensate dairy farmers who suffered in the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in the earlier months. And the idea is that there'd be a minimum payment to everyone who had some type of loss due to, and the words were, milk that was discarded. A bottom line, or I should say a floor payment of $1,500. Everybody gets that. And then another calculation of a pro rata share of all the remaining funds after everyone who had a loss from discarded milk is the words that are used. After that's all taken care of and everybody gets their flat $1,500, take the whole sum and then apply some ratios for each producer getting their share of what's left, their percentage of the whole, in other words. Now, this is obviously easier said than done. Big challenge in how to implement this whole thing. And the biggest challenge is that not all of these losses were from discarded milk. Many other things happened in the COVID-19 response here, or the results or the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the dairy industry. And it wasn't just farmer A is told that the milk truck's not coming to pick up, so he's got to dump his bulk tank. There were lots of creative solutions and work and other things that were done, such as milk may have been divided into component parts, and butterfat may have been taken off, and then what's left is the skim, and the skim milk may have been dumped. So there was some value that was obtained from that milk. So it wasn't just a pure case of all milk was either discarded or not discarded. There were lots of other things that were going on that led to losses. And in addition, the cooperatives, the cooperatives in particular, they were spreading it out across their full membership, so that maybe Farmer B's milk was the physical milk that was being dumped, but all of the other members of the cooperative were equally sharing in the reduction of price, because that member's milk was excluded from that which was marketed. So in other words, it's not an easy calculation to just say, you had dumped milk and therefore we're going to pay you for that from this state fund. It was a lot harder. It is a lot harder than that. But the Department of Agriculture only had 15 days to implement this entire thing from the language that's actually in the fiscal code. So that really led to a scramble, and they put together what's called an indemnity application. It's available now, and this is a link to it here. And the application deadline is September 30 of 2020. The application has some questions in it. Not all of these questions are to be filled out by every single producer, but the key to understand about this entire program is that because of the variability in how this, the dumping and the losses from milk markets drying up and the inability to market the quantities of milk that were being produced, every producer who's going to fill out this indemnity application is going to have to work with their handler, whether it's the cooperative that markets their milk for them, whether it's an independent dealer of some kind like Harrisburg Dairy or Rutter's or somebody like that who is buying directly from them. They're going to have to work with them to try to liquidate this loss, exactly what it amounted to in their particular situation. Everyone's going to have a different answer to those questions, and it's going to be a difficult calculation. There's no way that a producer can fill this out without consulting with who handles their milk for them. So that's essentially the quick version of that. In the interest of time, I'm going to go very quickly over the DEP guidance on land application of excess milk. We all know about hot milk that may have tested for antibiotics and it's positive and it needs to be discarded. Up until now, that's about all most of us ever experienced with regard to dumping milk. Now that there was this idea that there was going to be a bit more of a systematic disposal of milk, there needed to be some accommodations made. Department of Environmental Protection ultimately is the one who would regulate the idea that, well, I'm going to dump this milk either into my manure storage facilities, or, it was always a little mysterious to me in my past experience exactly where all this milk was going if a load had to get dumped. Well, it's sort of all come out from out in the open now. DEP sort of legitimized all of this and provided guidance as to exactly how to do it. And of course, what it's going to do is impact anyone who's going to be mixing manure with milk in a manure storage facility to ultimately land apply, which is the obvious and first obvious use, we'll just say that, of the milk. It's going to change the chemical makeup and the nutrient balance of what they have to land apply at a later date. So there needs to be revisions to nutrient management plans or manure management plans to reflect the fact that you have now put different nutrients, i.e. milk, into what was at one time calculated in your nutrient management plan just to be pure manure. So that's skewed all of the nutrient balances. We actually at the Ag Law Center did a podcast on this exact topic. The link is in the PowerPoint here. Robert Minen from Penn State Extension, who's been intimately involved in this, helped us with the podcast, and so there you can take a listen to that and get a lot more details. The key thing is right now DEP has extended the time period for this land application of milk to August 7th of 2020. Well, at this point in the season and where we are, I think we all know that there is going to be a lot more of this manure and milk mixture in storage facilities way past August 7th. So I think something about this, this end date to DEP's allowance of this to occur is going to have to end up being revisited. I'll just put it that way. Okay, let's just go ahead. Now, the CFAP, or the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, this is the big $16 billion direct payment program that USDA has rolled out as a result of monies in the CARES Act. And the dairy is one of the commodities that, I'm going to go back. Dairy is one of the commodities that, in fact, is eligible for direct payments under this particular program. There's a particular calculation and an application to be filed. And again, I'm going to go very quickly here rather than do the detail that I was going to do. The application can be filed as of May 26th, and the closing date is August 28th. Also, if you have cull cows or other dairy cows that you're selling off, bull calves or dairy steers, those can be compensated under the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program as livestock, and they have their own per head benefits that go with them if you sold them between January 15th and April 15th. Again, I'm going to gloss over a lot of the details. This is a little projection of what a 100 cow herd would result in for the periods at issue if you were applying for these particular direct payment benefits. This is some projections that were done. I'm just going to go quickly. This shows you that the maximum that any individual can receive, or one particular entity can receive, barring, I'll just say, barring a partnership or active management by more than one person, let's say, is $250,000. So the bottom line is, this shows you that somewhere between 600 and 1,000 cows is about where you max out on the benefit available under this program. This shows you a little information about Pennsylvania as of June 22. Pennsylvania has received in the CFAP payments, this is non-specialty crops, specialty crops, livestock. This shows you how much has been received of these direct payments for dairy. 1,525 producers have received payments to date. This does not include payments for, I think it does not include May. I'll look through this again and quickly get you the right answer. The payments to date have been, what do we got here? 49 million. Now that's only 1,500 PA producers. So we have roughly 5,000 and a little more producers. So we know that the number of Pennsylvania producers who have applied is fairly low in relative terms. So that's a little bit of a troubling number there, just to be aware of, that our dairy community is not quite applying with the speed that you might want to see there. There's been about of all of the CFAP 16 billion, there's been about 4 billion spent so far, and of the 3 billion of the CFAP payments that is strictly allocated for dairy, there has been less than 1 billion paid out, but it'll soon be over 1 billion, I'm sure. Okay, I'm going to wrap up since we are at 12:05. We did not have time for question and answer. Do we have any written questions for those who have been monitoring those? Ross or
Brooke, it does not look like we did. So, I mean, if anyone does have any questions, you can please feel free to email those and we can get a response, but it doesn't appear that there are any questions at this point.
All right, I want to thank everybody for hanging in there. I see we still have a good number of people who have hung in for the duration. I wish we could have got to some of the other issues to talk about, but I'm glad that we got Doug and Marvin in as our guests first. all of the information in these PowerPoints will be ultimately available when we post the video of this webinar. So pass it around if you think there are others who would want to see it. Ross, do you have any concluding remarks?
No, I just want to thank everyone for participating today, and please encourage you to tune in for our next webinar on the labor issues. So thank you very much.
July 14th. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good day.